This past weekend, I top-8'd twice with Prism, and each of the times I actually played a very different list, so I figured I'd show you guys what deck list I was playing with this weekend, and explain a couple of my thoughts behind them. One of them was a straightforward Luminaris Angel's Glow list, where we're doing normal things. It's a pretty stock standard list. There's a couple card choices here and there. And then the other one that I was playing is an Iris of Reality switchboard, like you would traditionally do in Prism before. So first, let's go over the stock standard list and explain some of the card choices in it. The deck list will be in the description below. As far as interesting choices go, we have Dreamweavers. I included this on Cody's recommendation. This list was stolen from Cody Williams on the team. I just needed something a few days before the Pro Quest, so I was just like, grabbed a Prism deck and went to the event. And then the second list, the Iris switchboard one, that one I modified a list, just like a couple card choices from one of my buddies from Battle Spirits, Austin. He's been on the Prism train for a while now, and he's been having some success with it. So I figured, trust angle, I'll see what he's messing with and see if it works for me. We're on Dreamweavers. Actually, the more important text on it was the Spell Void. I added these into the mirror on Cody's recommendation. It's nice having the Spell Void 1, so that way if you do like a normal play pattern of like throw a Herald, throw an Angel, throw a Herald, you can't get Chainlink 2 shot by Ravages. So what will happen is you'll attack with your Angel, your Figment, and then they'll crack their Halo and search for Ravages, shooting you for 1. It will destroy the Angel, assuming that you don't prevent the damage from something else, and then you'll lose your action point. So then you don't get to throw the second Herald, you waste a card probably. It's kind of a blowout. So having the face-up way to prevent that from happening on the board is really nice, so you can just like play your normal game without like having to play around as much. A lot of the Prism Mirror is playing around stuff. The game is very technical while Halo is still on the board. You can still do this with like Spectral Shields and such, and this actually did come up in the one Prism Mirror that I played, though weirdly didn't come up because I had a Spectral Shield in play. If I didn't have that shield in play, he actually did mention that he was going to go for the Shoot Me With Ravages play and didn't notice that I had Dreamweavers to prevent that. We are playing both chest pieces, Vestige of Soul and the Imperium Rapture. This is to switch between them if we're doing the combo game style with auras, or we're doing the Herald Beatdown style of the deck. The Rapture honestly isn't needed in a ton of matchups. There's like less and less matchups now that I feel like you're supposed to go like Herald Beatdown into, so the Rapture's becoming less and less necessary. But the matchups that you do play this into, it is amazing and game winning, and it's a 1-card sideboard change. Some of those matchups being like Katsu and Azalea is just like incredible in those matchups. I decided to opt for Gambler's Gloves in the list. Again, this is a Cody recommendation. He was just like, the math behind it was pretty good. Into KO, you make it into a game about their scabs, and then it's like a 75% chance to not get blown out by their die roll. The only time I played with this card, they rolled a 5, I re-rolled it back into a 5. So it just didn't do anything. Somehow I won that game, but that was more of my Genesis and Merciful kind of pulling a lot of value in that game and them going unanswered for a while. I would have won the game on the spot, I think, if I rolled their Gamblers into single action point. And then we are on AB2 for Pheano. A lot of people talk about how that matchup's kind of a buy for Prism, and this was something that I was talking about with my locals a little bit. It's a buy in the sense that you have a lot of tools to deal with the matchup, but you still have to play correctly and respect the matchup. You can't just sit down and say, I'm Prism, I auto-win. You do still need to play the matchup correctly, such as having AB when you don't have the ward in play. There's like moments where you could go for a flip on a Figment and they can attempt to kill you in response before you have the ward in play. So there's like little things like that. So you do still have to respect Pheano. You can still lose that matchup, but by adding a few cards to the matchup and playing properly, it is a very good matchup. And speaking of which, we have Judgment for that matchup as well, being able to shut off one of their plays with a Halo, potentially. It's not like a big deal in that matchup, because a lot of the times it could be a situation where they could just play that card in response anyways. But if you get their combo piece at the right time where it just doesn't make sense for them to play it there, it is worth like so much life being able to stop that from happening. And it's also good for Katsu being able to shut off their combo. I actually made a Katsu rage quit with this card in one of the games that I was playing with the deck. Just I hit their bonds in the middle of their line. They had to stop going off, and then they just lost the game instantly. It's really good in the matchups that it's good in. Speaking of figments, though, we are on 7 figments, so we're just not playing 1 figment, and we're not playing Invoke Shariah. Most of the matchups you're on 6 figments, but then sometimes you want to have an extra one because you end up going through all your angels in a matchup. Weirdly enough, that's some of the aggro matchups, but it is some of your grindier aura style matchups as well, where you do grind through all of your figments into like a guardian or something. But weirdly enough, like into some of your aggro matchups, just having the extra figment in the deck matters a lot, because you end up just like getting a figment into play and then flipping it for free with Rapture for the 4 life. So you just like burn through your figments really quickly into those decks. So having the extra one is just worth quite a lot of value in the deck. Importantly, one figment that I saw people not really prioritizing as much before is Figment of War. I think this is a like mandatory card in the deck. It's so good, it opens up some win conditions with the +1 counter when you're starting to combo off on your opponent. You just end up getting some like rando +1 counters on your flipped angels, and then when they finally clear through your arc lights, you just have a bunch of angels with +1 counters on them, plus a bunch of auras in play, and it's just like a pain in the butt for them to chew through everything on your board. And by the time they finally get through everything, they've taken so much damage, you've generated so much value, you don't really need much to close the game from there. Figment of War is just an amazing figment that I think was being slept on a little while ago. I was playing Library. I did not actually cast it a single time that day when I was playing. This is the Saturday deck list that I played. I didn't play it a single time in this deck. I didn't play any matchups that I really felt like I needed it into, so that was part of it. I think it would be good if I played any of those matchups that I would have wanted it, but I have a love-hate relationship with this card. Sometimes it's just absolute dog. It's just the worst thing you want to see because it's not a light card. It doesn't pitch. It doesn't block. It just doesn't do anything. It's good while you're comboing or when you drop before you start comboing. Sometimes it's just like an absolute brick in your hand and you just don't want to see it. Like if you're in the middle of doing an ALS loop, drawing this could just end your loop instantly. But if you already have it in play while you're looping, it's great. But you also don't really need that if you're looping. So kind of a win more card. If you're already winning, why do you need that card? So I might end up cutting it from the deck in the future. I don't know. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the loop, talk of the town recently, so most people I'm sure know what it is, but the loop is essentially you keep replaying Arclight Sentinel with Figment of Rebirth. What you do is you have an Arclight in play with a flipped Rebirth, you attack with Rebirth and put a second Arclight Sentinel on top of your deck, you pass turn, draw the new Arclight Sentinel, they kill the first one, rinse and repeat, keep playing Arclight Sentinel over and over again. You can also do some more scuffed versions of it where you draw with the Figment of Erudition and try to get another one into your arsenal for the next round. There's like ghetto ways you can do it, or like with a Tome of Divinity and such, but the basic loop is you're just trying to keep redrawing it over and over with Rebirth. Now, a fable that I think is a bit more necessary in the deck, though, is Light of Soul. This card is amazing. Sometimes it's just like free value. You're just like, whatever, it doesn't matter. You were just going to pitch a yellow to cover your turn anyways. Maybe you hit something, maybe you don't. Doesn't matter. Some amount of the time you get some free value. What really matters with this card is in some of the more aura-based, combo-y style matchups where you're trying to get like a ton of value and like do the loop or just generate a ton of value into your opponent with your auras and find a way to close after that. The Light of Soul, because you end up going through your deck quite like multiple times when you're looping, being able to generate a couple extra soul over the course of you doing that matters a lot while you're doing that. For example, it can give you the extra soul that you need for your Figment of War to get those +1 counters to actually establish a clock on your opponent. Because if you only have the one Genesis going, then you're just net neutraling off of your Rebirth, so you never get ahead on soul to like find a secondary win condition. Of course, you could hit with a Herald or something, but it's not frequent that you're able to do that because your opponent is heavily incentivized to just block the Herald while you're looping because they're not doing anything on their turn anyways. They're just killing the Arclight, so they just got to keep one card. So they'll block like one card in your Rebirth, and they have 3 other cards to do something else with. So finding that extra soul so you can get that +1 counter on something is a really big deal. Or finding something else you could do, like shooting them with the Ravages to close the game or something. Having that extra soul is really important while you're doing that. So just having a way to generate soul in the deck just by pitching, big deal. I ended up going with 9 red heralds. I think you could go up or down on that number. 9's like the number that I'm kind of comfy with. I kind of like 12 ways in the deck to kind of like force through action when I'm on the Herald game plan. So the Red Herald is one of those because the Breakpoint, and then Angelic Wrath is another one. Importantly, you notice that I'm not on Reprimand. I decided that I didn't really like that card, just too many non-blocks in the deck, so I opted to cut that for just like some more Heralds or something. Essentially, in the matchups that I would want that into, I should just be leaning into my auras instead anyways and not trying to like force through action with Reprimand. I think it has some play into KO, but I'm experimenting going more of an aura route into that matchup, so I'm not really leaning into that as much, but I might change my mind and put that back in. While we're on Wrath, so what I was trying to say is like the Breakpoint Heralds are a way to force through your on hits into the matchups where your opponent's willing to like block with 2 cards, but they still want to keep a 2-card hand to like play the game. The breakpoints help force that issue, either buying their armor or making them overcommitting blocks. And the Wrath does a similar impression of that, where you make them block Xaxes on like your 6-power heralds, and then you push through anyways and get your value. Very powerful into the more blocky matchups. Though I'm starting to lean a little bit away from it because I'm liking going auras into those blocky matchups anyways. So it might end up being something that gets cut from my deck because, like, for instance, Warrior, I can just go with the aura game plan and just try comboing them. And if I'm doing that, I don't really need to force through action with my Angelic Wraths, but it's still a very good card in the deck for forcing action. One thing of note, the pitch color of this card, I think is pretty flexible. If you wanted to play the yellow of this, that is perfectly reasonable. I think essentially the pitch color that you decide on this is going to be a role filler of what are you still missing in your deck list to like hit your pitch counts. If you're like a little light on blues and you have enough yellows, then it should be the blue. But like, let's say for example you're playing Warmonger's Diplomacy. Well, now I have an extra blue tech card in my deck, so now I have an empty yellow slot in my deck, theoretically, so the Wrath should be a yellow in that scenario. So you can be kind of modal with that card of like what you choose for pitch color. Now on to the Iris Switchboard version of the deck. So important things of note, we are only on the 1 chest piece because we're basically just always trying to get value out of Vestige plus Tome, just going nuts on these big rounds. You can also use Soul Shield to kind of get some extra value on a turn where you like Soul Shield, pitched blue, and then you can pitch another card to draw 3 cards with your Tome. If you pitched 2 blues to do this, then you could even have 1 extra resource to block with your Footsteps or something, or even cracking your Halo if you really wanted to. Generally, you're not cracking Halo on your opponent's turn unless you're like in desperation mode, or you need to like grab a Figment to like stuff their turn or something, like Triumph to make their big go wide turn terrible, or a Ravages to shoot yourself to kill your Figment to steal their action point, like little weird shenanigans like that. Generally, you're just trying to crack Halo on your own turn because you generate so much value on it when you go for those big plays, but it keeps them honest while you have the Halo in play. Like they should know that you can do these shenanigans to like stuff their turn, so they have to respect it while it's on the table. Since we're Iris, we do need to play a couple extra auras in the deck. I ended up playing 5 extra blue auras, 2 shimmers, 3 haze. You could play any amount of those if you want to go 6 or 4. Like, that's reasonable. I don't think that's a big deal breaker. And then we have some extra yellow auras, 3 odes, and 1 parable. Originally, this list had I think 2 parables in it, but there was no Light of Soul, so I just cut the parable for the Light of Soul, and I think there was a better cut I could have made for that. I was kind of doing this on the fly in the car ride there because I got back from the ProQuest on Saturday and just went to bed. I just crashed, and I just was like, whatever. I'm going to figure out what list I'm playing tomorrow. And I figured it out in the car. So it was a lot of scrambling, putting the deck list together. I think I would have liked another parable, and this Light of Soul should have just been over like a Herald or something. I'm not quite 100% sure what I would have made for the cut there. Kind of while I'm on that, I ended up cutting, I think, a set of blues from the deck mistakenly. I just didn't have them on me, so I couldn't play that set of blues. So you'll notice when you click on the deck list, there's a maybe board of 3 blue Ravages. If you are going to go take this deck list and go play it, I would add another set of Blue Heralds to the deck or something like that. I found myself shy on my blue count during my games, and it was very impactful not having the blue count for my Iris or for my big combo turns. So I would definitely do that. Cutting, like, I don't know, the yellow tenacities or something like that. Just find a cut somewhere in the deck to put some more blues in if you're going to go play this deck. Now, one interesting thing about the Ode is it's actually good on both styles of the deck, since it can give your Heralds go again, which is like actually a big deal. So on your like multi-blue hands, you can just not use Luminaris and just use the Ode for your go again, and throw multiple Heralds and an Angel in there, and just like have these really big go wide turns. It also makes your big combo turns even better, because one of the problems with your big go wide turns when you draw like, I don't know, like 7+ cards, you're holding this like fat hand, but you can't play everything if you're not holding auras. So generally that's what you're trying to do on these like draw multiple cards turns. You're just trying to dump auras onto the battlefield. But if your hand is just a bunch of heralds at the end of it, the Ode actually lets you convert that all into value. So like it's actually really good in the deck. And I gotta work on the sideboarding a bit. I think I agree with Austin. He was saying that he likes it in pretty much every matchup, and I because of how I scuffed put the deck together at the last minute, I believe I was sideboarding it out in some matchups just because like too many non-blocks in the deck. But in hindsight, I think I would be playing Ode into a lot more matchups. It's very powerful, and I think very underrated in the deck. One other nice thing that this deck gains by sideboarding in this way is when you're going for the combo aura style of the game and you get a Shimmers into play, if you assemble the loop and you have a Shimmers in play, a lot of the times, like, there'll be a turn where you get to not only play ALS and swing Rebirth, but you also get to attack with an aura on that turn. So every time you get to do that, you're now making the clock even faster, because that aura is going to keep getting counters on it, and they can never get that aura off the board because you're looping them. So it just slowly becomes more and more threatening. And one of the things about the deck is basically, how do you navigate the combo once you get to that point? First, let me explain kind of one aspect of it. You basically, when you sit down, you want to decide, is this a matchup that I'm trying to herald value my opponent, or I need to do this like big combo aura turn and try to find a win condition from there. There's some decks that just get pooped on by heralds. Just the raw value of you going like block 2 cards, throw a herald, and search a figment, flip it for free, and gain some life, get a value from the token it generates. It's just too much for them to deal with, and you also stuff their on hits because of the ward. It's just really difficult for some racing decks to deal with that. A lot of the decks that either are very high popper count or block very well against your heralds. An example of that, again, Warrior. You throw 7 at them, they're like, say less, brother, boots and 2/3 blocks. You're playing into their game plan and not able to get your value on what you're trying to do. So that's one instance where you're trying to do this combo aura game plan into them. Another one is they just play so many poppers that you just like cannot play a herald game plan into them. So you need to lean into this other side of the deck and try to find a win condition from there. So what does it look like when you're trying to do this? So generally, you're trying to find first a combo piece. So it'll be like a Tome of Divinity, a Genesis, or an Arclight, and find one of those pieces and slap that bad boy into Arsenal. And this is your investment plan for later. You'll try distracting them with like a Merciful or a Passing Mirage, and it's just like throw some random things onto the board and try to waste their time. And now you're waiting for a hand that lets you go crazy. Generally, it'll be you find one of your other combo pieces, and it is mandatory that either your arsenal or one of the pieces in your hand is usually an Arclight Sentinel, because what you're trying to do is crack your Halo. You technically don't have to crack Halo if you already have a Genesis in play for some reason. Generally, you should not expect to have a Genesis in play when you start going off, because that's like priority number 1 for them to get off the board. But so a lot of your turns will involve starting with Halo, but again, if you have something go to your soul, you don't technically have to do that because your Vestige is now live. And that's the big deal of this. You're trying to trigger the a passive of your Vestige so you can go way above curve of what you're normally able to play and draw a ton of cards and create a ton of value on your turn. So again, generally, start with Halo. You will pitch a card, put a Herald into your soul, and then you'll search a Figment. If you already have Erudition in play, you don't need to search that. But if you don't have it in play, Erudition's the one you're generally grabbing. The other ones that are important to get if you already have the Erudition in play would be a Rebirth or a War generally, because either of those can let you find a win condition now that you're going off. We're going to come back to that in a second, though. So you will get your Erudition after drawing your card from Halo. You'll flip the Erudition and swing it and draw 2 cards. Okay, now what do? We already have another combo piece somewhere because we waited to go off until we have a second combo piece like a tome or something. So now what we want to try to do is establish an Arclight so that way we can protect this Erudition so we can do it again next turn. And then we try playing some other cards here, and ideally what we're trying to do is, like, the best case scenario is we end the turn with an Erudition and an Arclight and a Genesis in play. You can go even further beyond that. Like, you can Magical Christmas Land into more on board, but that's generally what you want to, at a minimum, have. So I did have a game, though, where instead I just double Arclighted, and that was just about as good. But you want the Genesis in play, so that way you can feed Soul for the Erudition Figment, and it also triggers your Vestige passive every turn, so that way you can continue doing this. One of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to also go off when you filtered out enough cards from your deck where you're drawing so many cards that it's very likely that you're going to continue drawing into combo pieces now. So what you would like to do is daisy chain these Arclight Sentinels into more Arclight Sentinels and try to get like 3 turns in a row of Erudition value where they just can't get it off the board. They have to spend their entire turn killing Arclight. So they're just sitting over there blocking, or maybe not blocking, because they're in a weird spot where they don't know whether or not you're going to Arclight again. And if you're not going to Arclight, they're actually incentivized a lot of the times to try to keep some extra cards, because they got to get this Erudition off the board if you don't play another Arclight. So they need to make sure they at least have 4 damage in their hand to get this Erudition off the table. So from here, you continue playing your Arclights, you continue generating value on your board, and once you're done playing Arclights, now you have to figure out what are we doing from here. Sometimes you'll oops into a win condition, like Rebirth looping your opponent. You're just drawing so many cards, putting so many things on the table, you just oops Rebirth loop them. But other times, it's not as clean cut as that, so you have to actually close the game from there. So, well, one of the ways that you'll close the game is you just have so much stuff on board. I kind of mentioned this earlier, that it's pretty easy closing the game from there. Your opponent can't ignore all the value that you have on the table, like you have 2 Angels flipped, you have a Genesis and a Merciful and a Passing Mirage in play, maybe you have a Library or an Ode or something, and you're still throwing 2 Heralds at a turn at them. Like, it's just too much for them to deal with, and they've taken a ton of chip damage during all these Erudition turns, so you're ahead on board, ahead on life, and you're currently the active attacking player, so it's just really difficult for them to get out of that spot, unless they're playing like a Pauper deck, like I mentioned before. Important note also, if you are doing the Rebirth loop, you need to make sure that you don't play a Merciful Retribution during that. This is actually a nombo with a loop, since it will put the Arclight into your soul, therefore you cannot recur it with your Rebirth. So this is like weirdly a brick to draw while you're looping, but it feels like something that you would want to play because it's just like a ton of value, like in theory be shooting them for 1 a turn. But it does lead into one of your win conditions. If you are able to loop, you're going to be generating a Spectral Shield almost every turn. Sometimes you don't generate a Spectral Shield because you put a light card into your soul and draw a card, not an illusionist card. But in theory, you're going to end the loop with a ton of Spectral Shields in play. So what you can do is, once your opponent finally gets to play the game again, if they hit you or anything on your board that it triggers Merciful, you've played 2 Mercifuls. So you need to keep 2 Mercifuls in the deck to do this. And you play the 2 Mercifuls, and you have 1 Merciful actually shoot yourself. I know, that's weird, but because you are doing that, it's going to break all of your shields. What you'll do is 1 Merciful will keep shooting yourself, while the other Merciful will shoot your opponent. And for every shield you have in play, you will then deal 1 damage to your opponent. So theoretically, it should be enough to just kill your opponent from that point. So that's another win condition when you get to the bottom of your deck. It's kind of scuffed. You need a lot to do that, but it is a way to kill your opponent. Another scuffed way that you can win from this point is a Cataclysm stack, wherever that card went. So let's do Cataclysm. This one's kind of hard to do because it requires so much soul, but sometimes you end up with double Genesis in play and you just burn through your deck really quickly. So what you can do if you're going for that type of loop where you have the double Genesis is get Fat Soul and create a stack of 3 Cataclysms, and then ideally you want an Erudition. It could be something else. It depends what their life is at this point. And you throw Cataclysm, Cataclysm, Cataclysm at them on the same turn at the end of the game. You buy their entire hand, or otherwise they die. Then you throw an Erudition at them. You haven't actually used the Go Again on your Luminaris up until this point, so the Erudition is going to get Go Again. It's going to hit because they already blocked their whole hand, and even if they saved 1 card to block with, it's got Dominate. And then you're going to draw 2 more cards. You're going to now trigger your Vestige. So ideally, you can pitch a card to swing with an Angel and another Herald that you just drew here, presenting hopefully lethal on that turn. If not, you can maybe try to kill them with the Mercifuls afterwards. Now, one of the big things about this list is, why are we on Iris in this deck? Like, the combo works perfectly fine with Iris. So why do we need that? It's kind of an adjustment that I was trying for the field that I was in. I knew that a lot of people in the area respect Prism to an extent. They're still learning how to respect it, which is like, Prism gives a ton of equity into your opponent not fully understanding everything that's going on. It's a very complicated deck. I got a win into a very good opponent because he misprioritized which things to kill on board. It was the person that rolled the double 5 into me on Scabs. I had ALS, I had Genesis, and I had Erudition on the table. He killed the Sentinel and the Genesis. In this scenario, that makes sense, but he has to get the Erudition off the table and didn't know that. So a game that I wasn't supposed to win because he rolled the extra action points, I was able to claw back in because he left me with the Erudition, so I was able to get another round of Erudition value and get further ahead on board. There's just so many moving parts all over the place that's very easy to make mistakes into Prism, misblock. Like, one of the big things is people don't know which Heralds they're supposed to block. They'll maybe block both Heralds that you throw on a round. The big thing to know into Prism is a lot of the times you just want to stuff the first Herald. The second Herald is significantly worse than the first Herald, because no matter which chess piece I'm playing, the first Herald is really important to trigger my chess piece, either to get my soul alive or to get the discount on the free flip on my Figment, and also get the search. The second Herald, I don't have an action point anymore, so it doesn't matter as much. So you can, a lot of times, let the second Herald hit. All I'm doing is searching my deck and then passing. I don't have an action point anymore. That's where the Iris comes in. If my opponents are going to start respecting what I'm doing by even just sideboarding for me more, like bringing in Time Skipper Boots, Time Snap Potions, Lead the Charges, or just playing decks that generate action points like Mechanologist and Brute, finding a way to, like, I can't throw Heralds into these Pauper decks, but also I can't just head empty, no thoughts, do the Erudition Arclight thing. So I need to find another way to win the game, and that's what I was attempting to do with the Iris. I thought it worked okay. It needs more field testing. I don't have enough games with it yet to say definitively whether or not this is the way, but I think Prisms are going to have to continue adjusting their decks as people adjust to them. It's a metagame. It's going to be a lot of that, of moving pieces in the deck lists back and forth. As they add in action point cards, you'll change what you're doing in the Prism deck. Like, for instance, what if they bring in too many action point things and I just can't reliably do this anymore? Well, maybe now we just lean further into the Heralds with reprimands and such and try to win the game that way instead. There's experimentation and adjustments to be made with the deck. And that's it for the deck lists. Again, they will be in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions on the deck, just leave in the comments below, and I will try to get to them as I see them. As always, please make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you.